I heard you, Mr. Mayor. It's good to see everybody this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now in the hands of our Assistant City Clerk.
This is the pre-meeting of the Mobile City Council, Tuesday, August 27th. We have approval of minutes of August 20th.
Any issues, anyone? Okay.
Appeals, we have requests for waivers of the noise ordinance at Cathedral Square on September 7th from 4 p.m. until 8 p.m. At Mardi Gras Park on September 14th from 12 p.m. until 5 p.m. At 540 Texas Street on October 19th from 2 p.m. until 8 p.m. At 28 South Reed Avenue on October 19th from 6 p.m. until 10 p.m. At Cathedral Square on March 22nd from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m. At Mobile Skate Plaza on October 24th from 7 p.m. until 9:30 p.m. At Matthews Park on February 28th from 3 p.m. until 9 p.m. And at Matthews Park on March 1st from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m.
Any issues, Carol, or days?
No.
Carol? Okay, Madam Clerk.
Public hearings. Today is the public hearing to consider the application of Safe Ride Transport to operate a sedan service. Presentation of petitions and other communications to the council. Michael McFarland will speak about the conduct of the Mobile Police Department. Kenny Owen has concerns about cut-through traffic on Mohawk Street. Renee Chapa will offer remarks about public safety in Mobile. Marvin Charles Liu will talk about creating opportunities for underserved communities. Jerome McNeil, lack of affordable housing in the inner city, and Timothy Hollis, capital improvement, road repairs, utility companies, and responsibility.
Question to the administration about this public safety, just in case there is a question. Is Lasky or the chief, assistant chief, or y'all is going to be there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Madam Clerk.
Ordinances held over. 64048 rezone property located at the south side of Coyman Road, west of Todd Acres Drive.
Mr. President,
Ms. Reynolds.
I received a call from the applicant requesting that this be held 2 weeks.
83049, ordinance to annex certain property into the corporate limits of the city of Mobile. And this item will need to be held over until the same day as the pre-zoning. And I'll have that date.
Okay.
CIP resolutions held over. 21794, authorized contract with Parton Smith for parking and ADA improvements at West Side Park. Consent resolutions held over. 40558, declare the structure at 112 Bush Avenue a public nuisance and order it demolished. Resolutions held over. 01761, authorize agreement with Mobile County and Spring Hill College to expand and equip existing campus with Health and Science Innovation Center. 14775, approve an application seeking permission to incorporate a capital improvement cooperative district and authorizing such incorporation.
Mr. President, we're going to ask this be held over 1 week. We meet with the administration tomorrow at 10:30. Is that not correct? 8:30, I'm sorry. We tried to have this meeting before today, and hopefully we can figure out if there's any common ground to merge the two plans.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Mr. Woods.
so given the fact that the administration's plan is part of the budget, and we have this plan as well, I mean, wouldn't it be more prudent to wait until we get closer, or to at least until after the budget, to see if we're even going to pick that up versus continue or what we're going to do? I mean, I think both of them have merit. I think your plan is very nimble. It's a nimble plan, and I like that aspect. My concerns is really just kind of the amount of board members and says on that. The administration's plan, I like the accountability back to the city council. as far as, how this is implemented. But, the drawback on that is we see that CIP takes 3 years to get things done. So it's not as nimble as this. So, I mean, would it be kind of more prudent to maybe get closer towards the budget discussion to try to figure that out, or what do you think?
Let me just say, give us tomorrow. I've already kind of had some in between conversations with the chief of staff, with others. There may be room to answer and resolve those questions you're talking about as far as being able to produce and have a different course of productivity in the program. And also some defined project areas and things that narrow it down. So let us get through tomorrow, see where we are. Hopefully we can spend an hour and a half or so and find our way through this.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reynolds?
there are errors in this version that's here, and we have, to my knowledge, not received an additional petition from any petitioners. So this being held over really, can be amended. We'd have to say be petitioned in a different way. So,
Mr. President.
it may make sense just to table it and then something be reintroduced at a later date.
Mr. President, again, with the people coming to speak to this today, with the possibility of people continuing to come to speak to this even next Tuesday, even more than we'll have today, I think that leaving this on the agenda is prudent for public confidence, and also not to take away the idea that we're trying to or will do something that is going to provide some type of revitalization to underserved neighborhoods. I get the idea of Mr. Reynolds, but also the administration is aware that we did make those corrections that were asked for last week that we're talking about. But I held those after talking to the chief of staff instead of submitting them today so that we could have our meeting again tomorrow. If you didn't hear me already, I stated that the meeting was actually scheduled before today. So we may have already had something in works that would work for everybody. It was a scheduling conflict and timing that prevented that. So if you would indulge the 1 week, I would appreciate it.
You've got a petition. Signed.
Yes, we'll be okay.
Mr. Penn?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I think holding over 1 week is no issue. I think right now is an opportunity for them to meet, discuss, and talk about ways to collaborate. And I see no issue with holding it over for 1 week. So I support it.
And one more thing, it was hard for me to think this through 100%, but if it gets to the point where we do this in-house, I don't know how strong the need for the petition would be, because we, as the city, would be saying there's a dire need for the city to provide this. The petition was in accord with the State Enabling Act and how things had to be done in order to stand up the Capital Cooperative District. So all of that is done in accordance with the Enabling Act and not in accordance with what we, the city, can do ourselves.
And I'd like to say too, I appreciate Councilman Carroll bringing this to the council. And I'm pretty sure from people from Mobile Terrace to the people that's, that I represent in, Maysville area, they are wanting to know what's, going on, what we really doing in their neighborhood with the houses and everything. Many people are tired of just looking at blighted houses, but without a plan, people just don't, they just have questions in their heads. I am willing and would like to also to hold this over to keep the people assurance that we are going to work at it. We're still working at it, rather. I've been receiving a lot of phone calls and ran into a lot of people throughout the weekend, and people are very excited to know that, the city of Mobile is actually looking at plans, to put into their neighborhoods to make sure that the houses are getting better. So I appreciate you, Councilman Carroll, for bringing this to the light, to us for the city.
01795, authorize agreement for grant participation from Southwest Alabama Regional Highway Safety Office for Community Traffic Safety Program. 08796 through 08800 are approving purchase orders to CDW Government for annual renewal of network server management software to GT Distributors of Georgia for respirator kits, to Shaw Integrated and Turf Solutions for flooring at the cruise terminal lobby, to Trantex Transportation Products of Texas for traffic speed cushions, and to Sunbelt Fire for fire bunker gear. 37801 and 802 are considering the applications of Johnson & Johnson Way to Go to operate a sedan and shuttle service, and for Community Care and Transportation to operate a sedan service.
Any questions, issues, anyone?
Consent resolutions being introduced.
Yes.
Mr. President, on 37801, so we're asking you all that to deny that one.
Can you expand? Because when you look at the information that was given, a lot of the time is outside the 7-year stretch.
To talk about that one, and that'll be in conjunction with the executive session at the end of this one.
Appreciate it. All right, Madam Clerk.
Consent resolutions being introduced. 03805, appoint Alvin Garvin to the Advisory Commission on the Disabled. 58806, authorize assess cost for removal of weeds, repeat weedling, group 1655. 6807 through 6815 are determining appropriations to Mobile Law Enforcement Foundation, to P.L. Wilson Detachment of the Marine Corps League, to Lily B. Williamson High School Class of 1994, Tolmanville Warren Street United Methodist Church, St. Stephen's Road Love Ministries, the Village of Spring Hill, Olive J. Dodge Elementary School, the Child Advocacy Center, and Downtown Mobile District Management Corporation serve a public purpose and approve payment. 816 and 817 are approving awards of special bonuses to the firefighter of the month and the city clerk's office employee of the month. CIP resolutions being introduced. 08830, approve purchase order to Game Time for playground equipment for Crawford Murphy Park, $186,913.67.
That's in your district, right, William?
Yes, sir, it
You
is.
want to be as a sponsor?
Well, Mr. President, I always thought that when things were in council districts, councilmen were already sponsors of those items, and we're also
Let's add
Yeah.
Councilman Carroll down.
and also
Okay.
sponsors of all things in each council member's district. When it was in their district, I thought it should be noted on the agenda. But since I've been back in office, I was told that those things had totally changed from previous administrations, and there was no longer needed a council member to,
Not required.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, if it's in our district, we sponsor it.
right,
So we
but
just
in the
need to add
past,
name.
it had to have a council person sponsor it.
We haven't-
Yeah.
Hadn't been
All right.
required.
All right, Madam Clerk.
Resolutions being introduced. 01818, authorize agreement with Jaguar Consulting for HVAC upgrades at the History Museum of Mobile, $45,425. 01819, authorize addendum to agreement with Samsara for drive cams and increase purchase amount not to exceed $800,000. 01820, authorize agreement with E. Cornell Malone Corporation for Western Administration Building re-roofing, $122,800. 01821, authorize non-reimbursable agreement with Comcast Cable Communications of Alabama for the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue Complete Streets Project from Broad Street to Butchers Lane. 01,
Whoa.
Yeah.
Ms. Carroll.
Okay.
You good?
Yeah, I've already read it. I thought I heard something totally different. This is going with the MLK project. Yeah.
01822, 823, 824 are authorizing non-reimbursable agreements with Alabama Power Company, AT&T, and Alabama Power Company for the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue Complete Streets Project, Broad Street to Butchers Lane.
Mr. President,
Yeah, Ms. Reynolds.
the 01824 is actually a reimbursable agreement.
Yes, I'm sorry, reimbursable.
Can somebody explain to me sort of how this all works, just as point of information? Why these agreements are necessary and what a reimbursable versus non-reimbursable means?
Good morning, everyone. How are you this morning? So there are several types of agreements that we have to have on our project. First of all, they're required for our LDOT money that we have, and they also detail exactly what they're required to do with utilities while we have an open construction project. Most of the agreements that we have are non-reimbursable, so that means we're not have to pay for anything. Sometimes with the Alabama Power, there are some things that we do have to pay for, and they have a system that they do. For example, the non-reimbursable agreement, I believe they're spending $80,000 to move the poles and things that we need, and then our responsibility is about $6,100.
Do we have an agreement like that with Moss right now?
So Moz is contributing to the project. You passed that last year. So that's $4.2 million that they're going to be contributing to the project.
So it's a total revamp of Moss's laterals and things along MLK is what we're talking about at 4.2 million.
They're replacing all of the water lines and doing sewer repair, yes.
The only reason I wanted to make that statement is because a lot of times that people don't realize is that the potholes along the avenue are caused by seepage from the sewer line, that when the city comes in and they put asphalt over the top of it, or Moss does, it continues to erode and the pothole comes back over and over again. So it's prudent for them to redo the main, redo the laterals, and do those things under the street when we redo the street.
All of these projects are cooperative projects with Moz where they're contributing because it is important to fix the infrastructure under the street, all of it.
Right. And by the way, that is capital dollars from Moz and not from the city of Mobile.
Correct.
Because it's their responsibility. And we have a lot of those type potholes throughout the city where we have Moz issues where people actually think that the city's causing these potholes and not fixing them. But they're running, to be honest, some of them are kind of rampantly running through the city. I've got one at Michigan Avenue. I've got one at Hertel. I've got one at three at Hercules that we just fixed. But they continue to come back because of the disrepair of the sewer main or the sewer line underneath the street.
Mr. President,
Yeah, Ms. Wood.
I know in my district, I'd probably say 89–90% of the potholes that develop in the humps in the street are from Moz water lines. So that is an important point that you made.
When we do, Mr. President, when we do our resurfacing projects, is Moss brought in these sort of agreements as well? So we're just resurfacing a road. Are they brought in and go ahead and upgrade their infrastructure?
The answer to that, yes, they are. We coordinate with them generally a year or so in advance when we're coordinating with y'all. As soon as programs are locked down, we coordinate with Moz, Spire, any of the other utilities that might have something underground. You know, unfortunately, on the resurfacing projects, the budgets are not like they are on the rebuild. So, you know, if they have known problems, they go ahead and try to fix those in advance of the resurfacing. But inevitably, you know, a lot of the infrastructure out there is just old. I mean, that's the reality of what we're dealing with. So
But it wouldn't make sense to put new asphalt over, say, a leaking water line.
yeah, absolutely. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to come back in there and cut it. In fact, if they cut the street within the first 3 years, the permit fee that they receive for that is pretty substantial. Again, we coordinate the best that we can. We give them the list. We try to give them, you know, the list for projects that are in the outer years where they can program. And if they have, you know, say a system that they have known a bunch of utility problems on it, where they can go ahead and get out in advance of us. We do a much better job than we did, you know, say 10 years ago. But it's still, I mean, it's old infrastructure.
Yeah, look, while we're talking about that, I really want to say thanks because I had to do this twice. Once on the Everett Street with infrastructure that caved in that we had to totally redo before the paving that we found out when we're starting to pave. But right now on Hannon and McGill and those streets through there where we have to totally repair those streets that we just put out. And we've had the opportunity to get in there and coalesce with everybody to make sure that the infrastructure is going to be repaired on those streets at the same time.
Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to chime in on this issue. And we've had a lot of, this is with respect to the McGregor Avenue reconstruction project. And along these lines, citizens have been wondering why nothing appeared to be happening. And the answer was a lot was happening, but it was all happening underground because that stretch of McGregor Avenue is a trunk line for Moss, for Mobile Gas, for Alabama Power, for all kinds of entities. And they've been taking care of all their underground work. And that took about a year. It really took about a year, didn't it, Nick?
Yeah, that's correct.
To get all that done. And now we can see significant progress occurring, particularly at the south end of the project. So thank you very much for everything you did.
Yeah, we went through an exercise at the request of the chief of staff a year or so ago to look at some of the rebuild projects versus just basic resurfacing. And what we found, was that just a resurfacing of, say, Airport Boulevard or a Cottage Hill versus a reconstruction of a Texas Street or an Ann Street, when you looked at it, just the cost per lane mile, that was the kind of the common denominator. It was a 35 times multiplier. So you kind of got to think about the asphalt, even as expensive as it is. It's just like a layer of fresh paint on the walls. It's not renovating everything behind the sheetrock. So it's expensive. We do the best we can to coordinate with them. I think nobody wants the post cuts, but sometimes it's just unavoidable.
Vice President?
A couple of things on both of the topics that we've been talking about. When utilities cut the lines, or not the lines, but when they go in and make improvements to the street and they cut the street, some time ago, we passed a resolution that required these utilities to put some, what do we call those, little tabs or something in the street to show who is actually doing the work. And then B, when they come back to make the improvement, they can't just make it a pothole that they fill. It has to be a wider length of asphalt to keep it all smooth. And that's what now with our new program with the city that we're actually doing at the city level. We're not just coming in and filling a whole bunch of potholes that will come back up the next time it rains. We're actually going in and milling it and making a long stretch of asphalt, which will help the street last for another year or two before we can get to it to resurface. So those are two things that are going on. And if you're talking about drainage issues and finding drainage issues and taking longer to get a project done, all you have to do is go and look at Ziegler Boulevard. Digging up Ziegler, we found all kinds of drainage issues that nobody was expecting that came up that has caused this project to go on much longer than we had expected. But at the end of the day, everybody out there is getting a lot of brand new drainage work and things that have been performed to make things work better than we had even expected. So yeah, it's taking longer, but still, when you find these problems, you have to get them taken care of. And all of the utility work was supposed to have been done early on, before we actually started pouring asphalt onto the street. So, we do the best we can, plan the best we can, and go forward. So, yeah. We have been living with Ziegler for nearly 4 years now, so I know all about it.
Well, Mr. President, being that we're talking about potholes, and I'll leave this as my last request because I'm going to go back to it because now the neighbors have put a sign on the side of the road that says pothole beware at Michigan and Texas, which is gaining a lot of attention. And this is the same 2 potholes that I have asked the administration now about for 6-7 months now. It's becoming to get about as heavy as the pocket knife in my pocket, if you understand what I mean by that. And I think that we need to either address Moz or address whoever we need to address about the pothole at the corner of Michigan Avenue and Texas Street now. I mean, it's been, a year and a half since I've been talking about it. Well, let's please bear whatever attention on whatever utility company or whoever we need to do to please get it rectified. Thank you.
Madam Clerk?
01825, authorized non-reimbursable agreement with Spire Gulf for the Innovating St. Louis Street Complete Streets project from Broad Street to Water Street. 02826, assent to the annexation by the city of Sims of territory located within the overlapping police jurisdictions of the city of Mobile and the city of Sims.
Mr. President,
Ms. Gregory?
on this one, a gentleman will probably be here to speak today. He lives in the Magnolia Grove neighborhood, and his particular section back there will back up to this newly proposed development that the city of Sims is proposing, and he's got some concerns about traffic. So just wanted to give you that heads up that he will probably be here to speak about it. And if there's any information that can be shared, that would be appreciated.
And Mr. President,
Mr. Woods?
Mr. Leonard, on this, just for total transparency, clarity, this is, the city council can't place limitations or contingencies on this. It's kind of an all or none. For example, the city council, we can't put something in there saying, we consent, but you can't tie into existing road, existing streets. I mean, that's more kind of thinking through it. That's more of the city of Sims, should they annex this area, should we consent, once they annex, once it goes to their planning commission, that's where the control would be for, access and tying streets in together. Is that kind of, I guess, your understanding?
I'm not sure if we can put anything to the consent to annexation itself. I think we could come to some kind of agreement with Sims if necessary, and we're going to be looking into that if we can.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Clerk?
08-827 through 08-836 are approving an item award bid for engineered wood fiber playground surfacing and purchase orders to the University of South Alabama for EMT courses for MFRD, $34,000, to Vulcan Incorporated for overhead span wire mounting brackets for traffic engineering, $22,880, to Hughes 360 Services for concrete pads for traffic engineering, $25,850, to Wilson Dismukes for 50 Honda inverter generators for MPD, $49,000, to Sound Associates Incorporated for rental stage, sound, and lighting equipment for Mardi Gras Park concert for events department, $15,000, to Chris Lavorne Pile Drivers for removal and disposal of abandoned vessel from Dog River, $46,000, to Celebrate for subscription for forensic extraction device for MPD, $44,121, and to Galls for bulletproof vest for MPD, $69,530.40.
Mr. President,
Mr. Davis?
I'd like to come back to 08-834 and get a little bit more information on this program of removing these abandoned vessels from Dog River. How many vessels have been removed? How much does it cost? Where's the money coming from? How much do we intend to spend? That kind of thing.
Is this just one boat or boats?
It says one boat.
Yeah, I was just wondering. I know where one in particular is, and I just wondered if it was that one right at the launch.
Right at the launch, moored to the piling, I think.
Yeah.
But it hadn't sunk yet.
No, it
It's still
hasn't.
floating.
Sorry, thank you. Yes, this is from the Removal of Derelict Vessels program. It was funded by NIFWIF. This one specific boat is for a paddle wheeler. It's supposed to be removed, chopped up, and then hauled off on a barge. As far as the specifics so far, I believe that there has been at least 15 removed so far. It's been about $50,000 has been spent so far on these. I'm not sure how far we are through the list of boats, but I know that they are continuing on with this, and then they're about to do an RFP for the pilings underwater as well.
So the money's all coming from someone else.
Yes, it's NIFWIF and originally funded from NOAA.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
25-837, authorize and accept permanent sidewalk easements for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue Complete Streets Project. 37-838, consider the application of Safe Ride Transport to operate a sedan service. Announcements.
The kickoff for MLK, Councilman Carroll.
As soon as they're ready to go, I'll be glad to have a kickoff party for MLK. I'm looking forward to it. I've also asked or provided an additional $20,000 to accommodate a study to do a floating fishing pier down there. And a key word here is floating, because the FEMA and HUD are going to say that any permanent structure in a waterway is not permissible. Jen, if you remember in 2010, I wrote a paper about what we could do. What we could do at the creek below. That time, Roger Williams for entertainment, and I'd like us, if possible, somewhere in the future to be able to do that. So look forward to it. Can't wait. Also can't wait to get the Herschel Williams Park sign unveiling done. Hopefully we can get that done soon too. But as far as announcements goes, and I mentioned this to the assistant or interim chief this morning, I have not been brought up to date 100% on the shooting on Paper Mill Road of the 3 men, 2 women, and 1 15-year-old kid. But however, again, we've been talking and sending notes to the administration about the racing on Paper Mill Road. That's been happening now since I've been back in office for at least 2 years. And we've been asking for a way to stop the racing on Paper Mill Road. It appears as if though this incident, some have called it a mass shooting, has somewhat occurred around the racing on Paper Mill Road that happened this past weekend. And I would think that if we could do 2 things here. One, do something to prevent the racing on Paper Mill Road. It would both help the neighbors as far as the noise, but also help us with a little prevention and not letting these things happen again. Jim, if you remember when I was in office last time, they weren't racing on Paper Mill Road. They were racing on the top of I-165. Do you remember that? And we got them to stop racing on the top of I-165 somehow. So now we need to get them to stop racing on that stretch of Paper Mill Road. If we have to put something in the street like we do to prevent the kids from doing the skateboarding or whatever it is, then we need to do something to prevent the racing in that part of my district. So we prevent the racing, which is illegal. We would deter crime, which is illegal, which is been an issue for us, but it would help us in what we need to do as far as protecting our city. The other thing is that the neighbors have asked for some type of meeting with the administration. I believe one of the pastors, Lamar Brady, and possibly Christopher Williams may even come down to speak to the administration on this. I asked if they would speak to you guys before they actually came before the council so that we can find a way to get this under control now that it seems to be escalating. And I know that we all want to see this stopped, and I know that we all want to protect the people in our city, but we all want to prevent situations that may possibly have gun violence arise around them and have people or unintended consequences happen in our city. Thank you, Mr. President. Oh, one other announcement, good announcement. On Saturday, I had a chance to hang out with a whole bunch of SEC past football players out at River Shack. Expected to see some more of you guys here. Bunch of Alabama players, Chris Andrews Foundation and 59 South put on Grilling of the Gridiron, and I'll talk about that more at City Council meeting. But it was a whole lot of fun to see a bunch of old friends that played at Arkansas, Alabama, Florida, all over the SEC. It was quite the good time and quite the thing. All of the money raised went to charities and a whole lot of things. So it's a great weekend.
Going back to MLK, is that going to interfere with Mardi Gras? That's portion that people been asking.
I would think that it would interfere with the Mammoth Parade for what, 1 year?
MLK.
Jenny, or is it not that 1 year in 26? Or was it 25, 26? I can't remember.
We wouldn't start construction until after Mardi Gras this year,
year.
and we're still going through approvals, obviously, with Restore and our LDOT funding. There would be 1 year that there would be, construction happening, but we would do the exact same thing that we did on Broad Street, where we would level the site, make it passable for the parade. So there would be very limited, any disturbance at all. And we've gone through that with the community at our meetings.
After
Correct.
Mardi Gras 25.
Yes, you're welcome.
Mr. President.
Mr. Penn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just had a couple question for the administration. Just need some clarity. With municipal enforcement, I've been getting a lot of calls regarding properties, people keeping up like blighted, leaving just large amounts of trash. What is the process after they get so many calls with that? If people keep calling multiple times, what is the guidelines? Is it to enforce it? Is anybody here? That
Good morning, Gary Jackson with Municipal Enforcement. The process with the SRO calls, we make sure a municipal enforcement officer create a report on those properties where we notify the owner and try to get some resolution from that. If no resolution is taken, then we move to the next level. It may move over to nuisance abatement where it will be demolished, or we will notify the Public Service Department to try to come in and help mitigate the situation.
So if the person is living in the house and they still have just large amount of,
If the person lives in the house, then the person may receive a municipal offense ticket and they will be pulled into environmental court. Right. If
so
there's,
does it go to the owner or the renter?
it goes to the owner.
And is it the first is a amount of that ticket is a certain amount of money?
Yes.
Okay, how much is it?
I think with the court costs, it averages about $322 per offense. So when a municipal enforcement officer goes to the site, they identify every violation that they see. So the person may have several tickets in regards to that particular site.
How many violations does it take to get to the court level?
Just one.
The problem is, and I don't know how big a problem it is right now, but the problem is you can't, the person has to show up in court for the fine to be levied. And a lot of these landlords, it's hard for the city to get service on them. And so no one ever shows up at court. There's no fine. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, if the owner lives within the city, within the state, we can basically issue a ticket to them. Most time, the owner of the property lives out of state, and it's hard to pull them into environmental court.
Is that just the ones with people living in them you're talking about? Or is that the empty properties too?
That's occupied.
That's occupied.
Right. When it's not occupied, there's no one to issue a municipal offense ticket to. It transition over to nuisance abatement.
And we levy the liens against the properties.
Yes.
If I remember right, it was always hard for us to go against the owner. And this goes back to the property that's on the corner of Government and Broad, where we had so many issues with addressing the owner.
Right.
I thought that somewhere along the line, we were trying to propose some state legislation which allowed us to go after the property owner when the property owner was out of town or in town, even if they didn't come to court. Did we not ever pursue that or make that happen? And I'm asking the administration this because I know I heard it. So did we not ever do that, or it just floundered in the wind and never happened? It never happened? Not that we're aware of. So it never happened. So is there a possibility that we can pursue state legislation that allows us to go after the property owner? Because that seems to be our biggest problem when we have people living in the properties. It's hard to get the renters to do anything, but the problem is the property owner. So be my recommendation that I think, if I remember right, we had to actually pursue state legislation and have to go after the property owner, if I remember right.
But what would be the state legislation you would seek?
Yeah, I can't remember all of the details right now. I'd have to go back and look at it, but I'm pretty sure if you give me a week, I could probably dig it up and find it and figure out what it was that we needed to do at the time. But the years are running together now, and I can't remember if it was this administration or previous administration that we're talking about it. And it stemmed from, if you remember, Dexter, the problem that we had at the corner of Broad and Augusta.
Yeah, I remember something about that, but not the details, because it's the out-of-state, in particular, the out-of-state owners where we have the problem with trying to get compliance with cleaning up properties, whether it's the house itself is derelict or the trash around the house. All of it is a really big problem in a lot of our neighborhoods. Another issue that we're finding is when some of these renters are evicted and they move out and leave all their stuff on the curb, then we can't find anybody to pick it up. So and the neighbors call 311. 311 comes out and looks at it. Well, it's an eviction. It's too big for us anyway. So it sits there week after week after week.
Right.
And I have to call and beg and say, look, I understand the situation, but this is a horrible blight on the neighborhood. We've got to pick it up. So there's got to be a way to get some fix on this. And, I certainly appreciate the help that I get when I make these calls. But it's just very difficult to have to handle these situations. It's not fair to the residents who live next to these properties.
Right. Many times when the property, once they are evicted and the debris is placed on the right of way, that becomes a zoning issue. And we transition that over to the zoning and the Public Works Department to try to notify the owner, the landlord, and issue tickets also to that person.
Mr. President, let me apologize to Gary. That tells you how far my mind was running back. I kept calling you Dexter. Man, I am so sorry. I may have been 15 years in the past thinking about all of this. But Gary, this is Gary Jackson, y'all, not Dexter or Gary. I apologize for calling you Dexter over and over and over again, man. I'm really sorry for that.
Mr. President, I was wondering who you was talking about. I was like, you got a new, I thought that was your middle name. He know everybody, so I thought that was your childhood name. But the last question is, like, I know the city can't pick up tires, but who pick up all these? Like, if people are dumping these tires and I'm getting calls, who can we call to pick up the tires?
So in short order, sometimes we get them in particular areas, but what we're working on through state legislation is trying to make sure that it's illegal to not only dump them, but we can enforce that as a measure. Right now, it's either state or county, but we do pick them up at some time, so that happens. But I want to back up, Mr. President, back up to some of the questions that got asked about enforcement on houses. So as a policy standpoint, we take a very aggressive approach on blight. You see these houses being torn down and or secured on a regular basis. Those are unoccupied. We don't take that same approach on occupied houses. That's one, because it's really tough to deal with landowners in the state of Alabama. And two, we don't ever want to push anyone out of their home. So as administrative policy, that's not something that we do. But from the state legislation part, it takes so long. It takes so long to get that pushed through. What we did at the ordinance level some time ago, and some of you all remember this, is that we did make that focus on the actual owner. But so many of those owners are absentee. So if it's a slumlord, we deal with code enforcement and we take that route. If it's unoccupied, we deal with blight, with securing and demolishing, which you all vote on like clockwork, but that was a very arduous process as well. But if there's a renter and there's an owner who is not necessarily making them keep up the property, there's where the tough part comes in. And so chasing those owners and the renter simultaneously is where we can get more aggressive. We may have to seek state legislation to do that, but that takes a very long time. Are we very aggressive on doing so? Yes. But do we also have a level of compassion when it comes to people with poverty in their homes and not making sure we're not pushing somebody out of their homes? So what we can probably do is look at the court level, when somebody doesn't show up, what we do when they're consistently not showing up, if we get them served and they're not showing up. And we may need you all's help with that particular part of it.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Woods. This has been a problem for some time now. And I understand the difficulty of getting your hands on an out-of-state landowner. Have we inquired? I mean, other large cities in the state and small cities have to be having the same issue. And have we inquired and find out if they're addressing it, how they're addressing it? Maybe they have figured it out.
Actually, when we worked on the ordinance last time, we did, and it was to make the ordinance applicable to both the landowner and the renter, right? And that was with commercial, and that was very involved process, largely
Right.
commercial, not as much with residential real estate. And so getting them served, less of a problem now. Getting them to come to court, not necessarily is easy. But where the rubber meets the road is we need to make it enforceable, even if they're absentee and they don't show up, as long
Right,
as we can show
right,
service.
right,
That's the
right.
key. And that's what we'll need y'all's help, not only figuring that out, but carrying that to bear on the enforcement side. So making sure that the ordinance reads like it reads, but when we're in court and they're not there, doesn't matter if they're not there.
Right,
So
right,
we may even have to say explicitly, even if they're not there, we're allowed to take action.
Right. Once we obtain service on them, then we need some kind of mechanism to hold them responsible, whether they show up in court or not.
Right.
And I think you'd find complete support on the city council for a measure like that.
Mr. President, are we talking about these, when somebody say evicted and these big piles of furniture and all that stuff are out there? Is that what we're talking about?
Either that or the place is otherwise violating city code.
Well, I think there is some resolution generally that can be found with this, and that is, that let's just take this scenario where they pile their stuff off at the curb by way of eviction. I heard that it's being transferred to zoning for zoning to handle. But I think a good resolution would be the city picks that stuff up and it charges a fee. And then y'all put it on the city council agenda to assign that fee. And now it ties up this equity these people have in this house, where they can't sell it, they can't transfer it. The title company's going to see that, they got this lien on their property. So you may not get the immediate return on it, but at some point, the city's going to be reimbursed for it and, applying interest to it as well, where we're going to get our money back.
So I'll tell you, that's very similar to what we do with weed liens and with demos and security. Typically, we're going out, we not necessarily always getting everything cleaned up, but when it becomes blighted, we take care of it.
I'm
So-
just thinking about the ordinary, say, person who lives on the street. You got one bad neighbor or something, or, they're having this turnover and eviction happens, all this crap sits out on the street. Well, the city should be serving all those neighbors in there and go out there and provide the service and get it out of there. Not saying just free of charge to these people, but, the city will get its money back eventually if we take a hard line on it and sort of tie up their title to the property. But the broad and general public who lives in the neighborhood, that problem's resolved for them. And the city sort of eats it on the front end, but eventually it catches up. We get reimbursed.
So you're going to need specific legislation for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll need a specific legislation.
So
for
when we
being
go
able
and
to do
say, board up somebody's house,
Mhm.
okay? It's declared a public nuisance.
Yes.
We go out and we board that sucker up. And then we place a lien on it, and at some point later, we get reimbursed on that cost, correct?
Right.
Okay. So using that same legislation that this is a public nuisance, is it not available to us to apply it in the same way? That
No.
We as the city council declare that this big pile of junk in front of your house is now a public nuisance, and we're going to take corrective action as a city by removing it, and we're going to apply a lien as a result.
So it's going to have to deal with the structure itself. That's what I'm talking about. Now, if you wanted to expand the legislation, that's a different story. But what we do is
Municipally or state?
both. Both.
I think what he's saying, you have to tie it to blight and nuisance abatement. That's what you're saying, right?
Yes. And so
I'd like to explore that.
Yeah,
Some other time.
let's let Mr. Woods go back and consult with his very, very strong team of attorneys and come up with a solution for us.
Right.
Is there a way to assign a cost for city services, like, for example, when a contractor puts trash out on the street that's above a size and it's not in his dumpster, and the city charges a contractor $25 for that particular site?
probably so. The answer is right. I don't know in particular at this moment standing here, but I gotta remember who else was here when we went through this process to deal with blight. I don't know if I know Ms. Gregory and Mr. Daves and our president will remember We went through about an 18-month process dealing with blight. There was these tear downs and demos that show up on your agenda on a regular basis. That was not a normal thing 10 years ago. It was, going through the Bloomberg I-team, working with Public Works and Gary and David, changing 2 different forms of legislation, changing the ordinance, fixing our process, 14-point steps to do what David and Gary now do like clockwork. So it's possible. We've done it before with no cost and no extra people, just resolving the process, but it will take time.
Mr. President.
Okay, Council,
well,
Council, 3 more minutes.
Yes, sir.
Because we got to go into executive session, okay? 3 minutes.
Um,
Mr. Mayor.
I assure you, we don't like getting the phone calls. We don't like riding by and seeing all the trash out there. It makes you want to be able to find somebody and hold them accountable. For 5 years, we've been trying to get legislation, what we call the tire ordinance, to give us the ability to enforce the state tire ordinance. The last 2 years, there was no local legislation, presented at the State House. Okay, so that cut out 2 years of being able to do it. It's back on our agenda this year to try to get it done. Hopefully it will get done this year. And then we can enforce those people that are dumping tires. So it's always been on our agenda, or at least for the last 5 years, knowing we had to do that. I want to go back, if I can, real quickly, Mr. President, talking about the infrastructure. 10 years ago, we made a comment there was probably $300 million worth of broken infrastructure in the city of Mobile. I think some of y'all will remember that. And that's when we, was following that was the CIP and how much money we were going to spend on infrastructure. I would say that today that there's still $300 million worth of broken infrastructure, if not more, simply because of the price. If you look at the rebuilding of Michigan Avenue, that's probably $50 million. If you look at rebuilding Ann Street, it's $30 million. So you can easily jump up to $300, $400, $500 million. We have made a dent in what is out there, but I would say it's only a dent. But I'm reminded of what Councilman Small did in the very beginning. The first year we really had CIP money, he put almost all of his money, if I remember right, into the rebuilding of Ann Street. Only because he put that much money in it did Commissioner Ludgood put money in there, did the city find some other money, and so we started on Arlington rebuilding that. Okay, since that point in time, we have spent a lot of money fixing our parks. Okay, but when I ride around and I look at still the broken infrastructure and knowing the major projects that we have, and knowing that all we have is $28 million in CIP funds plus 4. So that's 32, let's say, in CIP funds. You've got about another $35 million in other capital to spend. Okay, I think that's right. But we have got to figure out a way to spend more money on infrastructure, broken sidewalks and broken roads. And we're only able to do it with partnering with malls, partnering with Alabama Power Company and these others that are bringing money to the table. And they have been excellent about, putting their dollars in that simply because it helps them when we rebuild a road for them to rebuild all their infrastructure. So it's always in the front of our mind of the things we need to do. But as we look at the smaller CIP projects, which pay dividends, it makes you popular with the voters, but we have got to address some of this major infrastructure, and it's only going to be through figuring out how to get more partnerships or more grants to get it done. So we're still working on it.
Anything urgent from the council? All right.
We've got a couple matters for executive session. The first one, my name is Britton Bonner. I'm an attorney licensed to practice law in the state of Alabama. I assert that the planned discussion is within the proposed executive session meets the requirements of section 3625A of the Alabama Open Meetings Act. In particular, the executive session is necessary to discuss preliminary negotiations involving economic development, and will include a discussion that, if recorded in the minutes, would infringe on the character of items covered by the Alabama Trade Secrets Act and set forth in the Open Meetings Act. The planned discussion will last 15 minutes, possibly 10. There will be no action required after we have finished my portion. Ricardo has something as well.
So that we have a second matter that falls under the Open Meetings Act that needs to be covered in executive session. My name is Ricardo Woods. I'm licensed to practice law in the state of Alabama. I'm the city attorney. And that item deals specifically with the good name and character of an individual that is not a public official. And I'll certify that it does fall under the Open Meetings Act exception for executive session. I would ask that you all conduct one roll call vote for both items, and then we reconvene at the 10:30 hour.
Second. Probably moving second in the discussion. Madam Clerk?
President Small,
Yes.
Vice President Gregory,
Yes.
Councilmember Penn,
Yes.
Councilmember Carroll,
Yes.
Councilmember Daves,
Yes.
Councilmember Reynolds, Councilmember Woods.
Yes. Okay, we'll see each other at 10:30 downstairs.
We do have one announcement. Sorry, I'm not going to be like the bad penny that shows up every week. But a 60-second PSA. We're having our community forum next Wednesday, 10 o'clock at the Innovation Portal. We've gotten a lot of traffic on the website, and we've already begun meeting with folks who've reached out to us. If any of you would like to be there on Wednesday, we'll put you up front so that you can have some remarks. We're also going to be sending you an email with an announcement that you can put on your personal social media if you're willing to do that. And I don't know how many people will be there next Wednesday because it's not required. We just wanted to give you the opportunity to do that. So thanks a lot.